collective, we could have so much more power. And John Lennon kind of like tried to lead on to help the people become aware of that. And I think like in the 60s and 70s, there was a greater awareness and a bigger movement that was done because of that. But I feel like nowadays it's been hard to make a gathering. They've tried to do that Occupy thing. And then I feel like systematically it was like taken down. It's not that hard to put a little implant in there, some guy that's not really part of the group that tries to become part of the group that makes a scene or something. It's really not hard for them to dismantle these group gatherings. But I feel like we need to figure out a way to make it work where we can keep these outsiders out and keep the collective with integrity, unable to be penetrated by this corruption.
Listen to this. When we were doing the Bank of Ideas, we had people coming to us, and we would realize after a while that these people were not all there, right? We would recognize like there's something fundamentally wrong. And I remember speaking to one of them and saying, "So how did you find out about us?" And he kept saying that his therapist had told him about us. And I was like, "Are you kidding?" He used to go for therapy to a psychologist, and his psychologist told him about us, a group of people that had like basically taken a building that was owned by UBS, turned it into an activist movement, and we were like on like loads of lists, like terrorist lists in the UK. It just and this is something that has happened on a lot of projects where people arrive. And when you find out, like, how did you find out about us? It's almost like they were told about us by people on the inside of the system. And they come and they create so much trouble. Like, you cannot have a meeting. If you've got one or two lunatics in your meeting and there's like 50 of you and you've got like really good ideas, you cannot make anything happen if there's one or two of you that are just off the wall. You end up having to put them in like a safe room where they can like do their thing, so the rest of you can get on with the work.
This is the whole thing with Loki, right? He's the outsider of the adversarial ones, and his nature, you can't keep him out. He's not in Asgard because he's invited. He's in Asgard because they can't keep him out. They can drive him out, but they can't keep him out. And they can't catch him unless they have the Kvasir. One of the things I've been talking about here is that this, what's going on with Kirk is there's two Norse mythologies being mocked at the same time because he does fulfill both those roles of Balder and the Kvasir in the Norse mythos. And you had Kash Patel with his stupid, the most dorkalish way of saying "see you in Valhalla" that I've ever seen come from. I don't know if he's got Aryan blood in him. Is he North Indian? I don't know. He's pretty dark skinned for North Indian. I don't know. Right. So, I mean, were there Aryan Indians in the South? I can't remember right now. But I don't even think he's got an ancestral claim to say that. And he's saying it to a Christian who is still kind of on the neoconish side. So why would anybody appreciate that statement? Right. So Balder is the shining god. He kind of represents daylight and that warmth of it's the gold of the soul being allowed to shine on the earth, right? It's a representative of a collective soul. So Charlie Kirk is representing the collective soul of the Christian church. Kirk is church, right? I had heard Thomas Sheridan break down the symbolism of his name, because we have Kirk as church. Char means to have been burnt, and then a lie. Right, so the burnt lie of the church, or the lie of the burnt church. Right, and so this, so this event has this really beloved guy, and he was beloved, just because he was a really kind and personable person. He wanted everybody to win, right? That's Bald. That's Bald. That's also Kvasir. Kvasir would go about the 9 realms, particularly Midgard, where everybody met, and he would be solving people's problems. That's what he was into. He'd go about the land and he would settle disputes where everybody was fucking happy, and there was a golden age in the universe at the time that he lived after the Aesir-Vanir War. And his death didn't bring the great and terrible winter. That was Baldur's death, but the Kvasir's death begins all of the troubles that Loki exploits to instigate the trigger of the Ragnarok, right? And that starts with the death of the Kvasir, where the 2 dark elves who Loki's not involved with the death of the Kvasir, but Loki gets involved with dark elves in general. So it's just part of the evilness of not dwarves, but dark elves, dark sorcery, spirits of dark sorcery, to bloodlet him, which they made the mead of poetry, which then the Allfather stole, right? So that's the inspirational spirit that brings mankind together, this mead of poetry, the blood essence of the Kvasir, who was made by the gods as a super being. He had the essence of all the gods in him, and was brought here to show us that when you evoke all the gods from within, you find all the answers that gets everybody to win. That's the idea, right? And so these dwarves wanted to steal his essence and profit off of it, right? So they killed him. They snuck him into a situation to do what he does best, solve a dispute. They were pretending that they were fighting. One dwarf was called the Yeller, Gjallar. The other one was called the Whisperer, Fjalar. These are the shouting campaigns and the whispering campaigns that secret agencies use to spin the stories and the attitudes and to lead the Hegelian dialectic of things. This is Gjallar and Fjalar's sorcery at play.
Yeah, man, this is really interesting, when we look at how these mythos are spells. And I've always thought of that. Every mythological story is really the recipe for a spell. If you want to know how to cast spells, look at the mythos. It's all there. The characters, they're all part of the stage. And it's really interesting, like just looking at what's happened in the last month. I want to go back to the Burning Man. So it was, let's bring it back. Let's bring it onto the screen. So it was Vadim Kruglov, age 37, from Russia. And he was found on August the 30th at 9:14 p.m. I believe they reckon that he actually left this world when they were lighting the fire. And he was found about 20 minutes after the fire was lit. This is the final Burning Man fire. Now, Burning Man is all about sacrificing an effigy of a human, right? So the whole idea of Burning Man really is, it's a sacrificial thing, using fire as a sacrificing tool. Now, what I find interesting is the dates. So the 30th, as we can see here, is August the 30th. Then we look across to Charlie Kirk. That's the 10th of September. Right. So what's relevant about those two numbers? The 10th of September and the 30th of August. Well, if you take the 30th of August and then you count the 31st, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9, 10 days. The next day, the next person is sacrificed. Then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 10 days. And then they do the celebration, the 21st. And it happens to be on a full scale, not a full scale, a solar eclipse. Not a full solar eclipse, I don't know, but a solar eclipse nonetheless. And a new moon. And that evening becomes the start of the equinox, right? The evening of the 21st would be when you light the bonfire, right? So to celebrate the coming of the 22nd, because the 22nd, the day, that's the equinox. So, but that starts on the evening of the 21st. So it's very interesting that you've got 10 days, an event. So you got an event, you got 10 days, then you got an event, then you got 10 days, then you got an event. And this to me, just looking at the way that this is done, I don't think this is a coincidence, right? That these numbers are playing this particular game. Because 10 being the fundamental Sephirot of the Kabbalah. And a lot of these Rosicrucian magicians, they use this system particularly. And the fact that you've got two different events happening and that they seem to synchronize. And they seem to be carrying the energy of the burning man, which is all about ritual, sacrifice. So I wonder if there's a connection. Well, what do you guys think? Do you think there's some kind of a connection? Because these are both very strange events that seem to have happened at a particular time that they're going to be discussing extraterrestrials. Because this discussion that we're having now, which is basically they've been having these big discussions in the not the Senate hearings, in the congressional hearing. Trump has been interviewed. They've had a lot of officials speaking. They've had politicians. They've had people working from different companies, technicians, engineers, all sorts of people bringing testimony to the Congress. This was planned before. It's almost like they want to have the media as busy as possible. They also have another program running at the moment, which has got to do with the FDA and the control of the production of drugs. And some new piece of legislation that's going to fill in the gaps. I bet you they're going to be pushing these kind of campaigns pretty soon and probably write up like a long new change of legislation that people won't have time to read. You'll probably find that at this time that there's the legislation, new pieces of legislation are queuing up and that there's a backlog. There's probably a lot going on. Probably the Senate and the various different members of the U.S. political system are struggling to keep up with all of the changes that are on their desks. So they get their aides to read it for them, give them a prognosis. This is often what happens. I saw this in the UK when, like, interviewing, MPs, even a number of the Lords said to me they didn't even have time. They had to pay people to read the article, to read the articles for them before they were to vote in the House of, the House of Commons is where the MPs go. The House of Lords is where the Lords go. In the UK, it's slightly different. But regardless, I think that there's a smoke screen being created and that there's a kind of a public ritual, and that the fact that this public ritual is landing on an eclipse, from a shamanic perspective, you do not stare at eclipses. I don't care how fancy the glasses are. When it's eclipse time, I don't want to go out and put that light on my skin because it's not particularly conducive towards good health, right? Like, I love good health and I love being healthy and energized. When the sun is repolarizing its energy, you see, the sun is giving out life force. It's giving out sugar. All of the sugar that we eat comes from the sun. And this has got to do with the way in which plants are photosynthesizing and the hormonal changes that we experience through our pineal, which is sun related. Change the polarity of that sun's frequency. And that polarity is going to create a certain amount of dissidence on a cellular level for the electrical systems. So from my perspective and from shamanic perspective, it's not a time to go out and stare at the sky during an eclipse. But now what they're doing is they're getting everybody to go and stand outside and celebrate a memorial where they're going to be shooting guns at the sky. Well, are they actually going to be shooting guns at the eclipse? What are you guys' thoughts on all of this?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the sun, because the sun emits radiation. And I was going to mention that there was a lot of 33 symbolism put in front of our eyes on purpose. Obviously, the whole thing was a distraction from the Epstein files being talked about that day, and what's going on in Nepal and stuff. But yeah, there was 33 everywhere, and see, 33 is the dye gamma. Sounds a lot like so gamma would be radiation, like gamma rays, and it seems like by plastering this everywhere at this time, they're sort of trying to change the grammar. Obviously, dye is to change or to split, and it's like the dye gamma radiation. They're trying to like alter the radio waves around us by orchestrating these events and putting this symbolism up, so people are kind of distracted. And it's obviously done by design to be in between two lunar eclipses as well. And like you say, having everybody out at the funeral on another lunar eclipse or solar eclipse as well, is to maximize the amount of energy that people are emitting. And the sort of tools of fear as well, they have the technology to alter human perception via radio waves since like the 70s. Apple AirPods have been used to map the human brain. So the powers that be know how to manipulate us. They know how to like map the brain and alter our perception. And this is all being magnetized by these eclipses.
Last year, especially because the eclipse in April fell right almost smack dab on my birthday, I went out alone, naked in the woods in northern Appalachia while the snow was still on the mountain, and made very intentional ritual and stared at this thing with and without the glasses until the clouds came over and ruined the atmosphere. But I carried on with the ritual without being able to see fucking totality. But that part of Appalachia was about 50 miles south of totality. I just didn't want to drive any further. And it was very transformative for me. Within a month of that, I had purged some people out of my life for a foolish way that I thought that I understood them. Just was glad that I realized that I wasn't respected as much as they said they respected me. Right? And so that was very liberating, changed my attitude on a whole bunch of things. And carried me forward a little bit more determined in the monster as effective as I am, as I have become. So that's positive result from ritual. I suppose if it's amateur hour, then you should listen to Bush Whisper. But I think if you are, I think Mother Nature is to be respected and not feared. And if the moon's a construct, it's still operating within natural law. I mean, it fits into our sky clock perfectly, right? But there's a lot of dark sorcery out there, and that's probably why you're having negative effects, because most people, they don't want to stop using their practices because they want to have friends. And so you enter Thelema because you do want to do magic, but let's face it, you want to have friends.
Yeah, like traditionally, the eclipse was a time for the underworld.
Yeah.
So you go into the underworld. You go into a cave. You go into darkness. I like to be in a place of darkness during the eclipse so that I can see the underworld. Because you can't see the underworld above, under the sun's polarity. But there's also other things that change in the sun's radiation. It alters. So it can draw some of the electricity out of the cells. And it can change the electrical potential within the cellular system, which is a less prana, less chi, less life force, which means that you're less effectual on a subtle level. But it's interesting how, you know, we are now at this point where this is the underworld coming. Tomorrow is the underworld point. And so that this is like a powerful time that we should all be preparing ourselves for Halloween, right? Because this is the September that leads up to Halloween. Does that make sense? It's an eclipse. It's the underworld. We've got Halloween coming. That's a very powerful time. That's a time to get out under the moon. You know, that's a time for getting naked under the moon. But that's also like, for you guys, that's when it's like you say, it's going to get icy on your side of the world. Where I am, Halloween is naked on the beach time, right? And you're not cold. Like, it's perfect weather here, like October, November. It's not too hot. It's not too cool. It's just right.
I mean, like, it was 80 degrees yesterday. I'm in the Northeast, right? So, you know, it's like, it's still warm over here right now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which we won't stay that way. You give it a month.
Thing.
That's another thing, the weather. Yeah, so you were going to say, brother.
Solar eclipses were a time for like dark omens and like human sacrifices in the past, but like I like how we can kind of flip that into like the times now where we're having like an arising and of a consciousness, and we could do it as like a thing for ego death instead of like sacrifice, you know.
Right.
And I feel like it might be like an aspect there of hormesis where you like kind of like almost like Odin went to the well and like purged out one of his eyes to be able to receive like transformation and great gifts. You might like undergo like the exposure to like a solar eclipse to like, you know, purge out like what no longer serves you, and then like in a ceremonial way you could gain from going through like hormesis, like inflicting like damage on yourself for a transformation.
Yeah. We were supposed to pass one of the most basic things that is supposed to be understood via the mythos of Jesus, right? From the alchemy of the matter of being the Christ, the Christos, right? The crystalline, right? Is that here's kind of like a baseline parameter of being the guy. Just being the guy who's in alignment with nature and with love from the creator, right? So with this, you do not have to give blood sacrifices anymore for things. Right? No more killing a thing. You know, I would say that there would be that Odinic exception because it's a free will thing, right? If I choose to die for my own reasons, which may be selfless reasons, because maybe I'm doing it for my wife and kids or whatever, right? I can sacrifice myself to myself because those are two things that I cannot be separated from.
Yeah, speaking of sacrifices and the solar eclipse, in April of 2024, NASA launched 3 rockets called APEP during the solar eclipse into the ionosphere. They say it was to do tests or whatever, but I can't stop thinking of the story of Marduk and Tiamat potentially being the ionosphere, like the charged plasma. And that that we seem to be like replaying these myths. Like we see, like there seems to be a lot of myths being played out right now. Like with COVID, it's like see Ovid. It's about angering the gods. A lot of people don't believe in gods. They only believe in one god, or they don't believe in that one god because it's obviously a ridiculous story. But people have been detached from the gods, the guardians of dimensions. But the powers that be are using this power that's available. And I think that they're trying to cause chaos, or they're trying to make this primordial water or Tiamat release her monsters. And you have Peter Thiel, who's trying to recreate like direwolves and like mammoths and stuff. So it was interesting that they launched these 3 APEP rockets during the solar eclipse in 2024. And then now, in return, we have this 3-eye Atlas heading towards Earth. It's like, was that a call and response going on? Very interesting.
Yeah, I believe that during that eclipse, the APEP rockets built by NASA, they were launched at pretty much the same time as the Occulta and the Corona. What is it called? The Corona what? The Corona. I'll check it up now. I'll get it onto this thing here. Proba 3 is the ESA one, right? And they have 2 crafts, except only essential cookies. That is a rule that you should all follow. The coronagraph. So the coronagraph is a telescope, and there are 2 crafts. There are 2 ships called the Corona and the Occulta, which were flying with the APEP rockets. So this was a joint thing between the ESA and NASA. And there was a 3rd player at the table. I can't remember. It was a while ago. We actually did a show on this, a round table, I think, where we outlined quite a lot of this in 24. But so this is really interesting, you know, the fact that it's called APEP, the fact that it's called the Occulta, and the fact that it's called the Corona. You know, there's just so much that they're dropping on us. And it's all got to do with the sun. It's all got to do with the moon. In fact, this Proba 3 is really the facilitation of false eclipses. That's what they're doing. That's what they're trying to do. I'm not sure what happened with what's his name. Did he just drop off?
Yeah, he said he had to go in the chat.
Oh, he mentioned he was going. I didn't realize he was going immediately. I didn't get to say bye to him. Anyway, I thought he was going to go in a few minutes. But yeah, this is a very interesting story that we're sort of hatching out here, because this, I think, is so finger to the pulse. Like they want us looking up into the sky while they change the earth beneath our feet. Right? Sounds like the words to a song, doesn't it? They want us looking up in the sky while they change the earth beneath our feet. They want us dreaming off with lofty ideas while they change, you know, the writing in the books, while they change our histories. And this is a very interesting idea. Have you noticed how they're changing history now? Everybody talks about how they changed history in the 1800s, right? But don't you find it interesting how they're changing history now?
Absolutely. You know, they're changing the lexicon, the words that we use. They're changing like the fabric of our reality right now. They're changing our value system. They're trying to. You know, a lot of people are against it, but they're like at odds with the state. You know, so it's a bit odd. But I wanted to touch back on a little bit of the hidden past that's lost in the ancient times real quick. We can get back into this for a second. But there was a time where they worshiped Baal. That was a time before Yahweh. And some consider that Yahweh was an extension of Baal. Baal might have been an extension of Marduk. But it was said that Baal killed the god of death, Mot, who could be like equivocated with Hades. And then later it was said that God killed Yam, the sea god, who would be like equivocated with Poseidon.
Well,
But then
absolutely Tiamat.
also he killed Tiamat. Like he said, it was written that it is you who broke the sea with your strength, being Yam. You smashed the head of the dragon, being Tannin, the dragon on the waters. It is you who shattered the head of Leviathan, being Lotan. And so they said that he, that sounds like the story of Marduk, where he was the one that destroyed the great goddess, matriarch of all the gods that came from the sea. And so they kind of really tried to hide that later, but it was pretty out in the open before during Baal worship.
Can I ask you something? Was that Yam or Ham?
Yam.
Yam.
Yeah.
So I think Yam is what you say to invoke the heart chakra. Am I right in saying that?
Oh, yeah, but
Sanskrit, yeah.
Apparently Yam. So was that related to the heart, which would be like fresh
Well,
water?
More specifically, it is the Bij seed syllable of the air element. Specifically. So like when you use the lam, vam, ram, yam, those four are governing the four elemental qualities that are predominant in those chakras. So it's not specifically the chakra mantra, but it is used in the chakra for elemental work. Yeah, basically. And then the one that's really well known, the Hum, is the fifth element, which is centered in the throat, the Suddhi chakra. But yeah, it is used in the heart chakra.
Yes, I've heard recently that I've been trying to find where it is, but where supposedly the Leviathan is, there's been lots of earthquakes around there recently, like 3 or 4 Richter 7 or 8 earthquakes, and I'm not sure like if there's any truth to this. I just find it very interesting. Like, are they trying to awaken these old ones or these ancient energies, these ancient beasts? I've also heard as well that I think it might be, was it Satan, to get into this world, it would have to first come through the air, then the water, then the earth, then the fire, or he tricked the angels to coming into the air, then to the water element, then the earth, and then he couldn't get into the fire. Because I find this very interesting, especially in that order, because it seems like there's an energy that is trying to get into our minds, the air element. And there's lots of things like with Labubu, is it Labubu, this doll that kids have, who's this demon of the air. There's lots of air energy with AI and stuff, like wind turbines, and you have other energy relating to the air as well. And so something's come into the air element in our psyche. It seems like it's trying to get into the water, which would be our intuition or our heart. And maybe this relates to potentially the sea as well, trying to awaken the beasts of the sea. They've awakened the beasts of the mind of the air. Now it's trying to awaken the beasts of the sea or the oceans. And then after that, perhaps this being will come into the earthly, the material realm, which is the earth. And then after that, perhaps it would like to come into our fire or into our spark, because there's something that wants to come into this realm but has no spark. And I just find it interesting that you have air, the water, the earth, and then the fire. I think would be the depths of our core, which is our DNA, like the fire within. This is the end game to overtake our DNA and our spark. This is why they want to start testing babies and altering their DNA, creating artificial wombs and stuff. It seems that our DNA is at the core of everything. Like with COVID, in I think 2020, the Queen here in the UK did a 3-strand DNA ritual. It seems that there's a third temple they're trying to build, like a third way, like the middle way is they're trying to bring something into this realm. And I think 3-Eye Atlas has a part to play in that, because obviously it has the 3 eyes.
Oh, well, I hear what you were saying, General Shinobi, in reference to like the focus on shifting our attention away from the underworld, away from the sea, and to focus more on the sky, and focus more like on the realm of the God that pervades over the sky and the land, or the sky and the mountains, has overthrown the gods of the sea and the underworld. Or was the god of the sky and the mountains exiled from the sanctuary of the gods, and does he now rule over the human slaves that are suffering from plagues and pestilence, that have been pushed away from the sanctuary of the gods? In the narrative, they said that, and that, you know, we see over the time that the underworld has been kind of demonized, but in older times, it was always known that there was a sacred place where the soul goes to be transformed and reincarnated and emerge from. And so, you know, it's interesting how we now see it as such a darker place. But, you know, even during the times of like the Mesopotamians, it was considered to be like a dark place of death and rebirth. But, you know, the way it was portrayed with Inanna's descent, where she was hooked onto like a hook on a wall there, is very dark. But I feel like there was matriarchal narratives that were lost in our current history of things, where the underworld was seen as much more sacred than it has even like leaked through into the patriarchal stories.
Yeah, there's been a heavy suppression of this feminine energy, which is magic and water, emotions, the underworld, like the story of Medusa, the story of Hecate, and like Hecate being the like guardian of the crossroads and magic. They don't want us going inwards, because in the innermost cave, in the darkness, is where you find the truth. It's where we find ourselves, and they don't want us going inwards. They want us looking outwards constantly, even so far outwards up into space, to say that out there is all the answers, when really all the answers are already within us. We just need things to help us remember who we are, what we're doing here. And this is all to kind of get us off kilter, off our axis, like disorientated, like looking left, looking right.
Yeah, I think it's totally. I just wanted to touch down on the yam. So yam, that's where that was tickling at my unconscious. Yam was one of the ones at the Tetragrammaton, the Jewish Yahweh. There was this friction, and Yam was an oceanic god. I think Yam relates to Enki in a sense, right? So along the eastern Mediterranean coast and further inland in modern Syria, the Ugaritic texts, and
I feel like both and Leo and Yam would be like an Enki.
Yeah, Yam is a sea goat.
Yeah.
Like
Enki
Enki.
would be like a fusion of Yam and Mot. underworld and sea god.
Yeah, so Yam would be representative of Capricorn, like a sea goat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Like
You know,
like the Lost Canaanite pantheon that was kind of like ushered out when Yahweh kind of became monotheistic and henotheistic way.
the more we look at this, the more we see. Like here, we can see. I hope you guys are seeing what I'm seeing. If we're not seeing, then now you are seeing what I'm seeing. So they're talking about this Ugaritic religion. He's attested as the recipient of the offerings, and a number of theophoric names invoking him have been identified. So he played this major role. Now it's interesting, in the Baal cycle, he's portrayed as the main enemy of Baal, the weather deity, right? And they both wanted to be the king of the gods, right? The narrative portrays Yam as the candidate favored by the senior god El, though ultimately it is Baal who emerges victorious. But Yam nonetheless continues to be referenced through the story after his defeat. So in Elmar, he was amongst many deities venerated during the local festival of Zukura. Did I say that? Zukru. Sorry. Yam was also known in ancient Egypt, though there's not that much evidence that he was actually worshipped. In ancient Egypt, he was known. He played a role in the myth preserved in the so-called Astarte Papyrus. So it's very interesting when we look at that, right? My big takeaway from that was that, he seems to play the same role against Baal in the Baal cycle, as you can see, I've highlighted it there, as you see him playing in our biblical texts as being the antithesis of Yahweh. I always think that Yahweh and Baal are the same one, right? Because who was Abraham worshipping when he was about to pull that Baal stunt with his kid on the rock, right? That was a Baal stunt that he was pulling, right? He was going to remove his son's heart. It was a typical, like, this is how you rock with Baal. That was how you dance to Baal's music. So it seems that Abraham was worshipping Baal. The next thing, they're worshipping Yahweh. And so there's an interesting, I think, parallel here. But just to bring that Yam back, it's interesting that Yam goes back so far, right back to the ancient times, ancient Egypt times.
Yeah, I managed to find some really old notes on Yam here. So I found some really interesting stuff when I was looking it up. So what you were saying about Yam and Yahweh being the sons of El reminds me of the story of the two brothers. So you have El, and then Yam on this side and Yahweh on that side. And you have Saturn, and you have Kairos, and you have Kronos, two poles. You have Zervan, cosmic time, and you have Ahura Mazda on one side and Ahriman on the other side. And then you have Anu, Saturn, with Enki on one side and Enlil on the other. So one side you've got Yahweh, Kronos, Ahriman, and Enlil, and the other you have Yam, Kairos, Ahura Mazda, and Enki. And there's a reason I've put them in those boxes, is because the heart chakra, which you say Yam to evoke, I guess, has 12 petals, like Yeshua had 12 disciples, and it's a hexagram, which is the north pole of Saturn, which would be Kairos, and more of a watery, magnetic north side. And I find it very interesting that Yam, or the heart chakra, is the fourth chakra, because Enki's number is 40. There's just a lot of coincidences. Also, Yam being god of the sea and storms, and Enki being god of the sea. Yam being portrayed as a goat, and I equate Enki with the goat as well. Very, very interesting that there always seems to be like a father and then two twins or two brothers. And did you say that Yam was supposed to rule, but Yahweh went before him?
No, that in the tradition that Yam was challenging Baal in the those ancient texts for rulership. And I know that in the Old Testament, Yam was demonized by the Judaic peoples because they saw him as being the main enemy of Yahweh, because they were like rivals.
Well, that's still going on, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of rivalry there. So that rivalry was because they wanted to see who was going to be number one. It almost makes you think of the rivalry between Enki and Enlil.
Yeah. And Ahura Mazda and Ahriman, which is very current, this energy that is going on now too. Yeah.
And Enlil is a storm god, right? And Enki is the god of the ocean, and the storm god beat the god of the ocean and got premiership. And that's exactly what happened in that other story with Yam and Baal. Baal being the storm god, and Yahweh is also a storm god, traditionally.
Yeah. But like, are they also trying to take our attention away from Marine Admiralty law and deep underground military bases? It's like, oh, he took over that stuff, so don't worry about that. Don't think about those gods anymore.
Well, I think, yeah, the story of Zervan and Ahura Mazda and Ahriman echoes with this as well, because it seems that the powers that be are trying to bring something into this realm, like rip apart the cosmic womb that we're in. And in the story of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman forced his way out of the womb. And I can see that happening now with AI being forced upon us, because we're not wise enough to use AI yet. We need to have balance of knowledge and intuition, where most just have the knowledge and lack the intuition. So therefore, the AI is going to fill the void of that watery essence and reflect back to us what our intuition should. So it's there's been a void created in us, and it's been filled by AI. And also, it ties into C-sections as well, by kids being ripped out of the womb. Ties into autism, because Ahriman and Enlil I see as both autistic gods, because humans were making too much noise, so they had to be wiped out. And that noise was just consciousness, I think. We were getting too conscious, so we had to be wiped out. The farm had to be contained, so to speak. And it seems that there's a lot of trauma and drama at the moment. They're both intertwined. And this is because we're at a crossroads and we're going from one yuga to another. And there is something coming into this realm via us. And it can either be Ahura Mazda or Ahriman. And it seems that the powers that be want it to be Ahriman. They want it to be in the artificial eye rather than the ancient intelligence. And I think like we're sort of in that kind of moment just before something is birthed, and that's why there's so much drama and trauma going on at the moment. And I think the last card that's going to be played with Operation Bluebeam is Deus Ex Machina, the god out of the machine. And then the last hand they'll play is a giant space show to kind of rewrite history, to say, there we go, there's aliens here, we're going to use our AI to battle them, and Elon Musk is going to be seen as the savior. But it's all a show, it's all a distraction from going within, hence the demonization of the feminine, the underworld, the subconscious. That's what it seems like to me.
I think you're definitely right there. There's a lot of demonizing of the unconscious They don't want us to be connected to the emotional aspects of ourselves, which is the deep gateway to the unconscious. Our emotions have been repressed in our education systems and the way in which, we've been taught to behave. It's all based upon rationalism, and the intellect and rational logic has been given, center stage. And at best, the emotional intelligence gets to clean the stage after everybody has left the venue. That's how it's been for a long time. I've got a couple of cool little images here that I will show you. And these images are basically, so these are different depictions of Yam, right? This is an old conceptual one. Do you notice that there's like a part dragon and there's part serpents? And serpent tail. Doesn't the top half looks almost like Leo-like with the serpent heads? Isn't that interesting? Those look like vulture heads almost. But when you look at this as like a mane, it makes me think about the Yalta Ba'oth for a moment, Then we've also got the Vedic version of Yama. And here's a Vedic image of Yama, right? Yama being related to the end of life, right? Here's another image of Yama. You can see him with all his toys. I hope I don't offend people, but I speak of these guys having toys because I find it quite interesting because they do have toys, don't they? Adult toys, if you will. But yeah, you can take a look at all of the toys that these guys are rocking. I'm trying to find a version of the Buddhist one of the Yama because it's worth looking at the Buddhist image as well. Not so easy to find a high resolution one. Okay, let's see what we got here. Yeah, this will do. See here we've got one of the Buddhist ones, huh? You notice how interesting this is? He's got the Vajra in his hand, which the other one doesn't have the Vajra, but well armed, well legged as well. Definitely not legless and well armed. And that poor cow underneath the baby bull is like really getting a good bit of like head to the ground scenarios. So this is like an old archetype for not being alive, right? So there's elements of the underworld, there's elements of not being alive, there's elements of the ocean. In the old time, the ocean was related to the underworld in a sense, right? The ancient Egyptians, when they looked to the west, to the element of water, they were looking to the land of those in the underworld. And they considered it that there was an ocean that one had to cross. And the crossing of the proverbial ocean was what took you into the underworld. So the ocean was always related to the underworld. So it makes me think that Yam has got a powerful underworld creation element. And when we look at the Sumerian legacy and the legacy of the Akkadians that came later, we see Enki. Enki ruled over the Abzu. And the Abzu were all of those underworld caves that led under the world, right? So Enki is also an underworld deity in a sense because of his relation to Abzu, where Enlil was the storm god. I think Enlil is the equivalent of Zeus. Does that touch base for you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wind god.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I view Enlil as the mind, Lord of the air, and Enki more connected to the heart. And also you were mentioning like the oceans and kind of crossing over to the next world or whatever. You kind of do that by going inwards, like through your heart, not through your mind, but you go inwards into the oceans, like within. And Anubis is associated with crossings as well, carrying souls across the waters. And I equate Anubis with the heart also, because you have the wane of the heart and the feather, the heart and the mind, I guess. And then also there was Saint Christopher, who carried Christ, the child Christ, across the water. And Saint Christopher has been depicted as having a dog head. So Saint Christopher and Anubis is the same character. Anubis is Anubis. Anu is Saturn, is the heart, I guess. And the abyss is the Apsu, is the water. So I think there's a connection between the heart and Saturn. And I found it interesting that, yeah, Saint Christopher, the patron saint of travelers, is very similar to Anubis. And also, Bush Whisperer, the first image you showed, it had 7 snake heads, which you can view it as demonic, but I think we know that the 7 snake heads represents wisdom, right?
The 7 principles, 7 chakras, 7 hermetic principles.
Yeah. So to the
7 aspects of life.
Yeah. So to the untrained eye, that monster can look like a demon or a monster, but really, I think that that's a trick. It's like Medusa. I don't know how many snake heads she had, but that might have been 7 also. Probably was 7.
That's an interesting story. Please, dear brother.
Saint Christopher was served the devil in Reprobus, and then he decided that he wanted something better and decided to leave hell, and he rose to the surface and became Saint Christopher by helping people cross the river, because he asked the people, the pious people of the time, what could he do in service of their God, and they said he could help the travelers, and so he helped the people to cross the turbulent river because he was so tall. He was also a giant, in addition to having a dog head. And so he helped the people cross. But in the story, in the figurative story of St. Christopher and his transformation, he himself transformed into a child by crossing the river and helping the people cross the river, because he found his innocence again after serving the devil and being in such a wicked place. He knew that wasn't right for him.
Yeah, that's interesting, hey? You know, the idea of him being a giant. And I find that this is one of those things they've really tried to hide from us. And it's probably because they don't really want us to look at the connection between extraterrestrials and ourselves. And I did show people a while ago. Remind me, in fact, I'll do a segment on this. I will do a segment on this. But I found a particular piece of text, which is one of the oldest translations of Sumerian language. Yeah. One of the translations done by the guy who was the top honcho of Sumerian linguistics. And, you know, the credibility of this guy is beyond question. And he's very clearly pointing out in a translated text. So it's got nothing to do with that other guy that, you know, Google wants you to believe, right? That this story was made up by Stitchin. So they want to stitch him up with it, right? Yes. But actually, when you go and look at the other real valid anthropologists that were linguists and spend time translating these documents and researching it, their actual translations of the original Sumerian is very clear that Enlil, Enki, and his sister and the other gods made humans here. So it's interesting. And manufactured the humans and had put bits of themselves in. So it's fascinating how, you know, you'll find a lot of Google telling you stuff about this Lucifer. Oh, it's just a conspiracy theory. There's no connection to the Vatican, but actually it blatantly is. And everything that's related to the Sumerian that we've heard, oh, it's just Stitchin making up nonsense. There are all these other experts that are ready to condemn him that not one of them will show a piece of quoted text ever. But when you go and find the actual quoted text, they confirm what Stitchin is saying. Exactly. Mind-blowing. So, yeah.
this movie, The Exorcist, the beginning, and it really shows like a secret lost church that was attempted to be buried, that was discovered and created this whole fiasco. But it was the lost church of Lucifer that was created like 5 years or 500 years after Christ or something, and then hidden away. But they show the god there as Lucifer being like this Mesopotamian god, Pazazu. And he's like kind of like a lion-headed god with like 4 wings. He's got his like paws up and stuff. But it kind of shows that they're trying to hint to you that we've already know about there being like this dark black pope and the black church that's hidden beneath the church. And they've tried to hide it, and it's being exposed. And so they're trying to like show this fictional narratives of it to like kind of keep people on like the sidelines, like to question like, oh, is that just because I saw that in a movie? That's probably just watched too many movies. You know what I mean? Whereas they're actually onto something, but they're being distracted by these little obfuscations. You gotta look
That's
after that.
Very interesting about Pazuzu, because I wouldn't see Pazuzu as being anywhere linked to Lucifer. I thought Pazuzu was an air demon.
Yeah, Pazuzu's the air demon, so it's very weird. It's very strange.
Have you seen the Labubu dolls? Like bears?
Like bears?
Indie. Yeah, there's they're everywhere, like these Labubu dolls. They look like Pazuzu.
Okay.
It's like a craze that kids are collecting these voodoo dolls. Because I found it interesting that it was an air demon, because it just seems that like they're trying to get these kids to invoke something from the air. So yeah, it's called Labubu instead of Pazuzu.
Whoa, that's creepy. Yeah, its head looks kind of reptilian, but it's got like a lion's mane for like frill, like a frill lizard kind of head, kind of look. So
interesting.
Iconic. That was a pretty dark film.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I mean, these rabbit holes are fascinating, and I think like we can't really talk about extraterrestrials without talking about demonology. For me, it seems like, but my experience that I've had and what I've come up face to face with, it's fascinating how many people are having spiritual experiences, and it is psychotronic technology being used by beings that aren't humans. Mind-blowing as it is, this is something that's happening. And then this is something that's written up in ancient times. We find a lot of this, right? That there were these beings that are spoken of, these various different orders of beings. And they used to speak about these beings as if they were like physical beings. And I think like a lot of our histories are coinciding in similar ways. Like we speak about Enki and Enlil. I actually, the more I think about it, I actually believe that they were physical beings that came to this planet with physical bodies. But they also encompassed more than just being physical. And upon leaving the physicality, the greater part of themselves was left behind as a field of consciousness. In the same way that, let's say one of us were to like leave this world, our etheric body could be left behind, would be left behind, not could, would. And that etheric body could be reanimated, right? So let's say like somebody passes and they leave the world, and you build a shrine for them, and you get people to worship their etheric body. What do you think is going to happen with all of that worship energy? Where's that devotion going to go? This is currency. This energy is currency. It would go straight to that etheric, would be empowering it. Next thing everybody would be seeing, whoever it was, right? And people would be having visions of like Indy in the shower, or whatever. Like he was there with me in the shower, dude. Like, like what's going on, you know? No, he was standing right next to me. He told me to put my fingers in the hole, you know, like wherever, like Emmanuel, like the story. So, sorry, Andy, that sounded wrong. I just thought about it. But like this idea of a high consciousness being leaving the world, and them having
See?
worshippers, and the worship of that empowering the etheric body to such a great degree that that etheric body then can be interacted with and lives on. How's that for an interesting concept? Like,
Yeah.
is this where a lot of our deities come from?
Yeah, I like that idea. I always kind of thought of like how the spirits like are the wind, and like when the wind moves, like it's the old spirits like moving through our like souls and stuff, and like giving us the wisdom. But like I like the ideas of like how they live on in our minds. They're like part of our consciousness. That's really cool. But like I always wondered like if people think that like the gods were like from outer space, like does that mean that Jesus's father, the heavenly father, was like an alien or like a humanoid manifestation of like an alien race or something, potentially, instead of her having like immaculate conception?
Well, we all are,
Yeah.
in a sense. That whole immaculate conception, that was invented later, by the way. The original, in fact, do you know that the original scriptures question, there were two versions of Emmanuel's birth, and one of them speaks about illegitimacy, as in he was a bastard, not immaculate, illegitimate. I think it's the original papers from Paul. Am I
Yeah,
right or wrong?
well,
Is it
right?
Paul?
In the original Greek, that the word for virgin actually means out of wedlock. Sex out of wedlock.
Yes,
Yes.
twin, right? As well.
What
Well,
would we-
apparently so. I mean, I don't know, but
So
I've heard this.
that's the story of the two twins, and one being illegitimate to the throne, like Jacob and Esau, Hura Mazda, Ahriman. It's the two brothers, one being illegitimate and then one being demonized, like Emmanuel, Yeshua's been demonized over the years. Like, there was probably just a regular guy who did the work and healed people and stood up to the corrupt powers. And what has happened is part of Operation Bluebeam to detach us from God or source and corrupt religions is to make out that he was God's only son and that he died for our sins, and that we can never attain to be as worthy as the Son of God. Like, we can all heal each other, we can heal people, and I think that he was basically a scapegoat. And I think that the same time that Pan died, Christ died as well. And there's no coincidence that around the same time as we were detached from nature, told to worship a false god, the Father, who's further away from us, rather than the Mother, which we're a part of nature. I think that there is something there, and it's interesting that Yeshua did have a twin, I believe, and have people been giving that energy to his twin all along? Like, are these pictures of Jesus not actually him, but his twin? It wouldn't surprise me.
In the Gnostic texts, the Nag Hammadi texts that they found, is in the apocryphal works, they say that Judas is his twin brother, identical twin.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
And it's so the whole story of who these beings are, and these extraterrestrial beings that we're supposed to be now getting afraid of. I mean, okay, let's sidestep into Project Bluebeam a little bit. So they now want us to be afraid that these extraterrestrials are out there. Why have you noticed that most of the information we're getting fed now by the government is that these beings have been messing around next to missile silos, next to nuclear warheads, next to military installations. The insinuation is that, like, we don't know whether we're safe with these beings around. That's the insinuation, right? Because that's why they keep pumping out a certain portion of the information instead of coming forth and saying, listen, in the last 20 years, there have been 172,946 sightings by members of the public.
Yeah.
There have been 6,842 recorded sightings by Air Force pilots, right? There have been so many sightings by commercial Air Force pilots. There have been so many sightings by people at sea observing the crafts coming in. That would be like enough evidence for people to go, wow, there are definitely beings out there. No, they've got to focus on these few situations, whether around military bases, where they're messing with military missiles, where they're, making our military, they're incapacitizing our military to some extent. And so it almost makes one think that they're sort of unconsciously suggesting that these beings could be out to make sure that we can't defend ourselves. And I think I think that Project Bluebeam is this. I think that there already was an invasion by extraterrestrials and that they invaded and got control a long time ago. I'm getting out on a limb here, peeps. And that our members of state are puppets, and that there are beings that are not physical, the same beings that John Dee was communicating with, the same beings that, Hitler was communicating with in order to get technology to build Vril power, powered crafts. And I think that there are these beings. There are different orders of these beings. I think they've been manipulating our governments. I think they have manipulated us in terms of technology and money to such an extent that we are now where we are at. There definitely seems to be a terraforming happening, right? There's all this nonsense about having to fix the world for global warming, that nonsense, right? Like we're going to fix the weather. We're going to take charge of the weather. That's the most ridiculous vomit I've ever heard of. The only reason you would want to do that is if you're terraforming the planet, right? In the real world, if we just look at it logically. So from my perspective is if a highly advanced extraterrestrial group wants to take charge on Earth, they do it by giving us technology. They give us digital technology and get our whole world onto the digital system so they can control us through our digital world. They use that to brainwash us. They fight a war on the inside. The war is not a war of guns and bullets. The war is a war of thoughts and minds. They get our Hollywood structures. They make sure that we've got all sorts of weird nonsense going on with children, bad things happening, right? So that we are so distracted by all the bad things happening, by the economic situation that we're living through, that we're not able to be able to look deep into the situation and see exactly what it is that's happening. But now they want us to be prepped and primed for the potential of a military invasion. And that smells to me like the next level for, okay, we tried the COVID story and it doesn't have longevity, right? We can generate fear up to a point, but people are going to end up throwing the masks away. But if we make them too afraid to go outside because of these guys in crafts, that is something that's got more of a lasting smack to it, because it's something that we would fear because we don't understand it. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this as an idea?
Yeah. The weather, you were talking about the weather and the climate change and stuff. The weather is just our collective psyche. So them manipulating the weather is mirrored with them altering our minds and our behavior. You go get ready, Bodhi. And Trump recently came to the UK a few days ago, talking to our Prime Minister, And Trump was saying how that we should get the military involved, how we should have the military deployed in streets and stuff. So it seems that they want military on the streets. Israel have been providing the UK with these armored trucks, like armored police vehicles. So like it seems that they're waiting for something, whether it's going to be civil war, alien invasion. They want some military presence because I think that people are starting to see the illusion, because the frequency of blue is 6.66. That's the mark of the beast. Now, the beast system is pretty clear if you look at it. You have Operation Bluebeam, which will be a one world government brought in by the UN, who have blue hats and a blue logo, and NASA. So you have the UN causing mass immigration. You have NATO, who killed Gaddafi, who had a £5 billion contract with Italy to prevent immigration. So part of Operation Bluebeam is to destroy national identity and like your self-identity as well. So I agree, immigration, we should be able to travel wherever we like. I really hate I disagree with passports, but it seems like there's a lot being done to cause a civil war, that like there's multiple things being played at the same time. Bodhi, can you stop it, please? Multiple things going on at the same time. And the first part of Operation Bluebeam would be to destroy national identity. So you do that by causing mass immigration and pushing cult-like behaviors like we saw in COVID. And everyone was wearing a blue mask as well. Another one would be destruction of the family unit, which we saw beginning in the 1950s, I believe, around the time the atom bomb was split. So you have the nuclear being split and also the nuclear family being split as well. And around that time, we saw a lot of UFOs and strange high strangeness. Sorry. So it seems that at the same time as them ripping a hole in space-time, there's people seeing UFOs and high strangeness. There's something linked there. And also the third point would be to erode religion, which would create a one world religion. And they do this by detaching people from God. And they did this via magnetism. So via magnetism, you can mess with people's emotions, and it also disables parts of the prefrontal cortex here. Sorry, one sec. Sorry, I just had two shouting children distracting me. So eroding religion by detaching people from God. And there are experiments they did in 2015 via magnetism. They can disable parts of the brain here, which, talking of critical thinking, with these little magnets, I can't think critically. So by disabling this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, people weren't able to think forwards or have foresight or think critically. It gave people brain fog, and we saw that in 2020. There's been multiple stages of Operation Bluebeam. 2020 was a huge part with the rollout of lots of LED lighting. And of course, LED lighting is a blue light, like quite cold, and it pulls. The fourth and final point of Operation Bluebeam, and I think this is their final card, would be the God from the Machine, which we'll see with a giant space show and perhaps aliens invading, like 3i Atlas. And the savior would maybe be AI. So Operation Bluebeam basically covers a lot. It covers this dark occultic magic. It covers us being detached from gods, suppression of the feminine archetypes, suppression of the subconscious mind so that we don't tap into that. So we're kind of shut off from parts of our psyche. Ori, please go away.
Yeah, completely, man. I do think that, we talk about magnetism in the brain and how electrical fields affect the brain. and then 5G and Wi-Fi, and that all of our systems are running off of Wi-Fi, and that these are creating electromagnetic fields that are going to sort of change the way in which our brain works. I'm sure that if you do an EEG before you sit in front of your laptop, and you sit right over your laptop in a Wi-Fi field for like 2 hours, and then do an EEG immediately after that, I'm sure that you're going to get very different EEG results. And a lot of that difference will be because of the electromagnetic stimulation of the brain. So I think there's like a lot of valid information there. And I think a lot of the technology that we've got, I mean, there seems to be this unnaturally fast progression of technology in the last, 100 years. It does stand to reason that we've been getting this from extraterrestrials. What do you think, Indy? How else do you explain the sudden boom of technology that has gone from,
I think
to the point where we are?
If you look back at the history of what's really going on in the background, I think you can really find a lot. If you look at the aspect of magic and what's been happening on in the narrative of magic over like the past few centuries, you have like John Dee and Edward Kelly making exchanges with these so-called angels for silicon back then, while they were working on the colonization of the Americas. So what were they trying to achieve? Apparently, according to the contract that they made, they exchanged human sacrifices by like many of thousands, or whatever number it was, hundreds of thousands, millions. It's not said, but there was an exchange there, and it's taken them this long, from like around like the 17th century all the way up until like just a half a century ago from today, where like computers started to become utilized. But I think they were probably working towards that for a much longer period of time. We've always talked about the automatons. They kind of fascinated about that and fantasized about it in like the Greco-Roman era, and like even the Mesopotamian times before that. But maybe there were these things before, and they just kind of tried to push it away from our history and pretend like they're new, because it has a greater effect on us if it's new. I could see that being the case. But I feel like, the technology has been rapidly advancing now. And so I feel like it could have something to do with the Roswell incident. The background on that story that I've heard is that it was an accidental situation where they're just using radar experimentation in the area, and it downed the craft, and they learned that they could down those crafts. They got a craft to work on and commandeered it. And I think they might have worked out like some kind of a contract for more ways to utilize the silicon that they had been given. And so they've really made more rapid advancements since then, starting in the 50s. Might have been like initiated in the late 40s.
What's the story about that ship that vanished and then came back? Do you remember?
Oh, which one is it?
I forget. It's famous. This whole ship that they were trying to cloak the ship in they were trying to use electromagnetics to hide the ship from radar, and it vanished.
Yeah, that's Philadelphia experiment. The ship vanished and reappeared, but some people were like stuck in the hole. Like if they said, if you didn't remember where you were standing and the ship disappeared, your parts of your body would be stuck and fused into the hole. And it was a horror show. That was experimentation with Tesla, like formulas that were secret, that kept secret. And half of the formula was given to the Russians, half was given to the United States. And if we were able to work together, he was trying to merge the conflict between the Axis and Allies. but I don't know if that he ever achieved it. But we might have been able, through espionage, been able to get that data and information to be able to work on that Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah, this is what I'm getting at. This is what I'm thinking. Like, I wonder how much of that technology came from other beings. Like we are, we are now starting to realize that the governments have been lying to us. They're coming clean. I don't know if you've been watching. I haven't been watching the latest one. I'm just so like, it's the same crap every time. They're just coming clean with stuff that I've known about for like decades. It's like, finally, government's acknowledging it. They've been lying for so long, saying like, no, there's nothing to see. There's no Area 51. There's no extraterrestrials. There's no UAPs. There's no UFOs. Now they're like, actually, there are UFOs. There are UAPs. Yes, yes, Area 51 was researching this. Yes, this is the mission. Yeah, this is what we've been doing. Yes, NASA has been involved. So are the Catholic, Vatican, intelligence services involved. And yes, we are getting our particular crew of Jesuits on the case to make sure that they're manning the satellites and manning the telescopes, so we can keep our eyes open for extraterrestrial life. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that points in that direction. I think, just common sense. But I also think that, like you say, we look back in our ancient times. This isn't new, right? All of these beings, like when you look at the old pictures of Quetzalcoatl and these things, it's like these guys are like riding like things, right? There are a lot of these beings wearing space helmets, are there not?
Mm-hmm.
Carved onto walls and rocks that are very old. So seeing people getting out of crafts, and removing headgear and helmets is not an unusual thing. And a lot of them look very, very much like what we would build now, So, and then, of course, you got India, where India is very clear, right? There's no mincing of the words. They're saying that the Devas and the Devis arrived in Vimana. And then they go on to describe the Vimana is a craft that travels between the lokas, between universes, and that it's got a spinning motor of mercury and organic processes spinning really fast to generate a gravitational field. So they're not just saying that all the devas, all the gods and goddesses arrived in Vimanas, which you could then think, well, maybe a Vimana is a metaphor, right? No, they're talking about how these engines were constructed. And that these Vimanas, some of them were so big that you could fit an entire city inside the Vimana. Yeah?
Wow.
So it seems anybody that looks at the Sumerian texts and says that it's all just metaphor, that these beings didn't arrive on Earth in spacecrafts, are ignoring the Vedas. Yeah? And just basically writing it off. Because these stories are universal. The same stories that the Dogon tribe have, right? The Dogon tribe believe that the gods arrived in spacecrafts. They got out, they landed on the Earth, and they came and taught us stuff. And so there's this pattern of evidence that we've got in ancient texts. And then we've got the carvings on the rocks, right? People getting out with helmets, taking them off. I think extraterrestrials are a big part of our history. I think when we talk about demons and we talk about angels and we talk about these other beings, I think we're very often talking about extraterrestrials. I don't know. Do you guys think that's too far-fetched?
Well,
I think it's equal to think that they might be from the future or from under the dimension or from outer space or maybe from like inside of Earth now that maybe they've retreated to inside of Earth. I think you have to keep open up like to any one of those four things. To me, I favor the inside of the earth because they seem very humanoid. Whereas if they were like a spirit being or something, they could manifest and appear a certain way. Then I could see that'd be more feasible there from somewhere else. They talk about the Pleiadians like that now, but I don't know about older times. Sorry to cut you off, General Shinobi. Go ahead.
No problem. Yeah, I think that I think it's more likely they came from extra terra firma, like extra Earth, but from here. And the reason I think that is because perhaps space used to exist, but I don't feel like here in this place right now that we can get out there via matter. Only light can leave. And I think that these extraterrestrials maybe here in this realm are from beyond the ice wall or beyond the boundaries of our perception. And the reason I think that is we're told, there aren't UFOs. And now we're told that, this is the push-pull, the this and the that. And I found it's always the middle way. We were told with COVID it came from a bat to a human. And then, oh no, the truth is out. It actually came from a lab. Neither are true. It's the middle way. And it seems to be the earth is flat. No, the earth is round. Oh no, it's flat. But I don't think it's either. I'm open to various possibilities of anything. I don't think anything is solid. I don't think anything is definite or concrete. I'm open to everything, but I do strongly feel that, yeah, perhaps these extraterrestrials are from inside the Earth, like inside another layer, or perhaps from outside. And I think that the ice wall is very symbolic of our fear. And I think that they want us in fear of ice. Like they want us to fear the ice caps melting, like by blocking out the sun. And I think if the ice caps melt, there would be more flow of water and memory. Like the water would go into the earth. It wouldn't just flood. It wouldn't flood the earth. And I think that they want us to be fearful of anything outside of what we know. And I think that restricting air travel had a big part to play in this confinement of where we are, because there used to be airships and people used to travel for free or very cheap and great distances. Whereas now we have restricted flights, very expensive for people to fly. And then beyond that, they want us in 15-minute cities. So it's gone from out here to here to here. It's this constricting. And that brings me back to the Jesuits. Can you guys confirm that the Jesuits' number is 201, or did I make that up? Have you heard that 201 is the number they use?
Let me check it out.
Because I haven't been able to find anything concrete. I did hear and I saw somewhere that the Jesuits use the number 201, because obviously we had event 201 in October or November of 2019, which if you play around with it is BOA. 201 is BOA, like a boa constrictor. And this is what the Jesuits and the Vatican want to do. They want to constrict us. And in the Vatican Hall, you have it looks like a snake's head also. And of course, Biden was Jesuit schooled. And
they're
around,
talking about Belarus. The Jesuits from Belarus. With that number, huh? The number 201 refers to the 201 Jesuits in White Russia, Belarus, who became part of the Russian Empire after the first partition of Poland, 1772. They came from 2 provinces and included 97 priests, 55 brothers, and 49 scholastics. So sorry, that's the relevance that I could find.
That's great. That made me think that Russia is apparently supposed to be the new Rome, and that obviously if there's Russian Jesuits, that would tie in with destroying the West.
Romanuska. Yep. They got the reverse ordinal number for the Jesuits order is 201, whereas the English ordinal is 177, but the reverse ordinal is 201. But the English ordinal for 201 also aligns with the mark of the beast vaccine, COVID-19 shot, compulsory mask, new variant of COVID, Delta variant of COVID, all comes out to 201. So people have associated those numbers with the Jesuit order reverse ordinal number in recent times due to that. And I think there's a big fuss about that right now, those associations. But none of this stuff seems like anything that doesn't relate to stuff since 2020.
Very interesting. Yeah, obviously Biden, he was Jesuit schooled, and COVID was kind of brought in then, I think. Or was it with Trump? But anyway, my point is that obviously there was something clearly wrong with Biden's mental health, something wrong with Bush's mental health, and the same with Trump. Like not too long ago, people were saying that he might have dementia, and earlier we were talking about demonic possession or attachment or whatever, and I've sort of felt that perhaps something latches onto the presidents, like some kind of other entity, because these presidents seem to not really know what they're doing, and it could be theatre, but I also think that they don't actually know what they're doing. Something else has taken hold of their consciousness, and it's like parasitical. It's like a parasite, sort of eating them. It's really bizarre. Oh, there we go.
Said that Catherine the Great of Russia protected the 201 Jesuits that she had acquired in 1772.
It's interesting when I look up the number 201 in my Godwin's Bible, it doesn't even reference any relevance, which is interesting in itself, right?
Yeah.
Because it should do, right? There should be Kabbalistic relevance here because of, it just stands to reason this number has been so pumped up over the last few centuries. You would imagine there'd be some relevance that has been drawn with distinctions with regards to numerations of names and words. It's just interesting in itself.
They say that Weishaupt died 201 days after the 54th anniversary of the establishment of the Bavarian Illuminati. So I don't know if the 54th year anniversary was like a big anniversary, but it seems a bit odd to me. So off numbers. But also,
well, 54 is half of 108. It's 6 cycles of 12. No? Sorry, 6 cycles of 9.
Yeah, interesting. But they said also recently Pope Francis lived in Suite 201 in the building since his election in March 2013. That's another little tie-in. And they say that Cardinal Pope also equals 201.
Yeah, that is rather fascinating to see. Like this number seems to have a place, but they've hidden it from us.
There's no cipher.
It means we've got to go and do some homework and take a look at what's the story with this number. I do think as well, you know, that if we get right down to it, like 99 seems like a very relevant number. 201, it seems like such an weird number, doesn't it? Isn't it just to you? It's a number that I struggle to grasp with my mind.
Well,
like I find it,
I see it as a boa. Like I mentioned, like 2 is B, 0 is O, and 1 is an A, like a boa constrictor, like a constricting energy, because there are different snakes or whatever, and obviously Typhon is one. You have the Typhonian Order, who I think that was their hand sign, which Winston Churchill got from Crowley, which is very interesting. Like the peace sign, that it should be that, I believe. Connection, whereas the Typhonian Order split, and we're told it's V for victory. Yeah, their victory, not ours. V for victory in dividing us further. That's
True.
you know, I haven't looked too deeply into that myself. I have heard from good source that that is a hand signal for the Typhonian Order, and yeah, I find it quite interesting because perhaps the Native Americans, I think, you used to use a hand signal similar to this, like for connection of two fingers, you know, or like doing that.
Yeah, that is really, really fascinating. You know, Winston Churchill is a guy I haven't really looked up very much. I just looked up his date of birth just for the, you know, just for the gas of it, 30th of November, 1874, which in itself is quite interesting because if you add 18 to 74, that becomes 92. And if you add 30 to 92, that becomes 122, right? So I think that sort of is a fascinating number, right? Let's see if we can find information that I can show you guys regarding that. The specific number 122 where is the 122 relevant? 122. Come on. They're telling us it's about angel numbers, new age stuff. Oh gosh. And it's dialing codes. But 122, if you look at it, it's like it's a prime factorization of 2 times 61. And so that's quite interesting, you know. But the 122 to me seems to speak so loudly about 1 and 2 becoming 2. 1, 2, 2. And so it brings us back to the root 5, but the root 5 containing the 1 and the 2. Now, when you got the 1 and the 2, they make 3. When you bring that 3 and carry the 2 and you compound that, it becomes 5. So, you know, you got 1, 1, 2, 3. This is the beginning of the phi sequence, right? 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. You know, 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13. 13 plus 8 is 21. 21 plus 13 is 34, and so goes phi, right? So it's just really interesting that 122 is a number that speaks loudly to me in terms of its geometry. It's not specifically outwardly known as the Mason number, but I'm sure I've come across that number in texts, and I'm going to go and look it up. I'm going to dig it up. I'm sure I'll find it in my library somewhere. But I think that, like, when we're looking at these occult things and we're looking at this extraterrestrial phenomenon, which I believe are so fundamentally connected, and my experience, just to dial it down to simple experiential relation, is when we are going inside ourselves. So let's say you start to awaken your ESP, right? And you start stretching out of yourself. You go into your heart and you start stretching out, and you start feeling the thoughts of other people, and you start stretching out. You start hearing their minds. You start hearing the ethers. You stretch out. You expand your consciousness out from your heart. What you're probably going to recognize is beings watching you at some point. And whenever you awaken your ESP, psychic spiritual abilities, to a certain point, they are there. And when you really engage with them, they will often try and scare you. But if you are like somebody that finds like the idea of being scared quite sexy, right? Like then they're in for a ride. Because like, oh, fear. I like that. Let's do this. So if you go towards your fear and you travel through the fear that they produce, you'll start recognizing that they're actually quite weak. Somebody asked earlier, why humans? Was it the star?
They said
with us,
why,
the star?
Why planet Earth, I think. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they were why planet Earth and why humans?
Yeah.
Why human beings? Are you with us, Star? I meant to respond to this earlier. Let me know if you're still around. Is the star? The star is the star in the room. This is the sunshine star calling out. Yes, you're here. So I think that was a really good like observation that you pointed out earlier. And I think like it's got to do with our potential. And because of where we come from, right? Because of where we come from, and I don't mean physically, we have this innate potential, this Venetian quality that overshadows these beings in a very profound way. We're young in our knowledge and experience, but we've got great power from this emotional field that we're so in tune with. And my experience of extraterrestrials is they are not very plugged into the emotional field. They're not very emotional creatures. And because we're so emotional, we can harness so much potential. I don't think that the average extraterrestrial beings have got the potential to just walk on water or make their bodies levitate. I don't think that's so much common to them. I think that they can do it augmented with technology, but humans can do that unaugmented without technology. We have this incredible power. And I remember being confronted by 3 of these beings. I mean, I've had a lot of dealings with them. And what shocked me was how easily I just took them. And it's very interesting. Ever since I was a child, I was taught how to exercise spirits from the physical plane, right? And I was shown by of all things, a spirit, how to do this. And it never occurred to me that these were relating to the technologies of beings being utilized to make a connection here as well. Then, but how easily we can take a being with our thoughts and our mind, and we can move it, and we can open up a portal with our thoughts, and we can force a being through that portal, and we can close that portal, and that being goes out to the other side of the universe where we send it. And it's very easy. We have that potential, humans. We have the potential to meet these extraterrestrial beings and take control of their mind. Literally possess them. We can possess them because we're so passionate and so much strength of energy and power. Our occult potential is overwhelmingly powerful. This is one of the reasons we've been dumbed down to such an extent that our powers have become unlatent. But when we tune in, the latency of our potential becomes so great that these supernatural abilities are a big part of humans. Now, I think that these extraterrestrials have got a very small, we are in a sense, but we've also got something else from this place. And I think it's got to do with our spiritual makeup as well. Because the lizards are they're quite strong, right? If you've had run-ins with the lizard beings, they're quite strong. But they are augmented with technology, and you can resist them and their technology. There could be a number of lizard beings trying to penetrate your space, and you can just make it no. And there could be like 3 beings, all augmented. They wear suits. The lizard beings wear suits, by the way. And the suits that they wear augment them where they are. They're not here. So that they can travel here through their consciousness in these augmented suits and interact with us, right? But when they come here, they are actually at our whim, but we don't know it. The same thing is what people don't realize. People ask me, how is it that you can go into a house where there's a poltergeistic being, poltergeist, and go in there all by yourself in the dark and turn off all the lights and, get out your drum and go into a trance? Why doesn't anything bad happen to you? And I always laugh and I say to people, well, the truth is these poltergeistic beings, the only thing that they can use are my abilities. And if you went into that house and they start using telekinetic abilities, it's your telekinetic abilities they're using, not their own. If they make something happen, it's your energy they use. People don't understand this. Once you understand this, they can't do anything. They're impotent. To walk in there and realize that, like, oh, you want to try and use my telekinetic abilities? Nah, not having it. Then they're suddenly stripped of any potential powers they could use to harm you if they're like a negative being, which they sometimes are. So it's just interesting how our brain model of reality has been reconcocted to put us here. Namaste, my cherry. How are you? It's lovely to see the cherry in the space. Is there a cherry in the house? Yeah, man. Sweet as always. So Earth is like a big spaceship. I like to think of Earth as like a living being, and we're living on her back, in her back. And so, yeah, when I look at this from my perspective, it seems very clear to me that those beings out there are very afraid of us awakening, extremely afraid of us awakening, because I've got a parallel. When I was in school, I had big groups of boys trying to bully me because they were scared of me, right? Because I was like literally much more dangerous than any of them. And they were so afraid of me that they used to want to and I was like, yeah, bring it on, man. Bring it on. Let's do this. In fact, let's go around the back of the school. I want you guys to like unleash your beast, I want to see what you guys have got. And because for me, it was a joke. I was like, it's just physical pain. It's all in the mind. How is that going to harm me? Just toughens me up, makes me more tough. I didn't mind that. But I think this is a natural thing. If someone has like a potential of power, other people might fear that, right? Here I was as a little boy remembering past lives in Japan. I had within me like the ability to release my ki as a child instinctively and automatically. And I had already been trained by a professional when I was like 5. I'd learned like really hard. So I was like, it was a no-brainer that I was going to be an SA champ fighter, right? If I went into whatever discipline I went into, I would have been a champion. And so, it just is that way. So us humans, we've got this potential of real power. And I think that this is one of the reasons why we're being kept down, because at the end of the day, all these other beings would be here with us, not us here with them. And I think you guys are right. I think there's a lot more beings here on planet Earth. But I question whether or not we can go to other places. That's where I'm going to push back, General Shinobi. I'm going to say that I think we can turn ourselves into light with the correct influence. And if we turn ourselves into light, we can leave this place. And then we can rematerialize from light elsewhere to become a physical being again. So I think it is possible for us to leave this place, just not in the conventional way that we've been taught with like a tin can rocket. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what I meant. I did say we can leave. Of course, we enter via light. We can leave via light. I don't think we can leave in tin cans, as you say. We can 100% leave, right? Okay, like we do when we're asleep. When we're sleeping, we leave this realm. Whether we float out there or go via our pineal gland as a portal somewhere else, who knows? But we can definitely leave, but via our light, not via material.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting look at the whole story as well. Like I have memories of warping the universe around me. Yeah, this was before the flood. This was before when we were all big. I was a giant. I don't know how big I was. I just remember feeling really big. And I'll never forget the feeling of the material on my body. The material was really rough, yeah, on my skin. I must have had like extraordinarily soft skin for the material to feel so rough on my skin. And the kind of math that this particular work involved was incredibly high-powered math. So it involved like creating a template of the entire galaxy in my mind, of where I am, and then a template of the entire galaxy in my mind of where I want to see the galaxy.
You froze a little bit just there.
Am I back?
Yeah, good.
Ah, there we go. Yeah, so like these two templates, one template of the universe from where I am now, and another template of the universe in relation to where I would be. And then forcing these two templates together. And obviously the template of the galaxy is everything, right? So like just imagine the amount of math involved. Yeah. You're drawing a diagram in your mind with triangles, triangulating each and every heavenly body for the entire galaxy in relation to yourself, all the fixed stars, everything. And then you're creating another template, and then you're pushing these two templates to merge. And then you are ending up in the other template, and the whole universe wobbles around you. And then when the wobble stops, you're standing on another planet. Yeah,
I have something to add to that. As sort of
yeah,
a similar like analogy that I've been using recently of because like the universe is just one story, like a universe. It's just one frequency, and I've been using several frameworks recently. Like you use the Saturn square as a framework, the Ka and the Ba and the Arc, the Mercury is another. The Merkaba is another, but I try to stay in the center while all of this information frequency vortexes around me. In my mind's eye, I'm in the middle of a vortex, and it's through the vortex that we bring things into this realm, I believe. And I use the electric magnetic spectrum of information, the red and the blue polar opposites, to sort of give a spin and then release what I don't need. And then by doing this, it can transport me to other universes, but in my mind's eye. Like I can, by doing the spinning, I can sort of have like profound understandings of not the mechanics, but the magic of this realm, of us, how we work, our potential. So by doing that, the vortex, I can kind of transport myself through my mind's eye to the past, to the future. And I remember with my anchor, the Ark, the Mercury, that everything is here now. All the myths are being played out now. There's no past and no future, just all the time is now. And that's all there is. And I use a few frameworks for that really help. And I did want to talk briefly about the car and the bar, if we had time, because I think it's really important that people understand that kind of the cosmology. Like the Egyptians had different parts of the soul. So the Ark would be this concept in Egyptian religion, which represents the transfigured spirit of a deceased person who has successfully passed the judgment in the afterlife, the subconscious, to become an effective and glorified being. So you do this by merging your ka and your ba. The ka, symbol like this, is your cup, is your mind, is your grail. And then the ba is more of your identity, your persona, which would be, I equate it more of the heart. So it's very important that we connect both our minds and our hearts, and we're not attached to one or the other, that we're not just thinking with our minds, we're just thinking with our hearts, or not just thinking with our ego or our hearts. We have a balance of both, and then stay in the center while this stuff is spinning around us. And I think that's key to understanding in what happens when we die. And the word die just means to change. Die is multiple dice, like we cast our dice, which is our fate, the words, the weird. And I think that it's really important that we understand the balance of the union of the opposites, because that's how we go through the center, through the middle way. So yeah, because also I'm mentioning this because we talked about talking about magic and stuff with COVID earlier, and at the beginning of some variants there was BA, like bar, and what was happening with that is they're trying to sever the bar, they're trying to suppress our intuition, so that we seek outside for guidance, and that was reflected in the cult-like behavior. And this is the spirit of Ahriman also. Ahriman is the we, the collective, the uniform instead of the unity. And this is what Blue Beam is, this kind of reversed magnetism, whereas instead of magnetizing things towards us, there's magnets and frequencies trying to draw things from us, trying to draw our emotions, so that we're spiritually dehydrated and have no water and have no bar, have no self-identity. So we get lost in the ocean of EMFs that's around us, like fish caught in a net or a web or the internet. Like we've swam into the internet and people are caught up in this sea of data, and lots of people are lost. They go so far left, so far right, they get swept off course because they have no arc, they have no anchor to hold them steady. So yeah, it helps to understand little bits of frameworks like that, like the car and the bar, and then it has a central point too, which is the Mercury, the messenger of the gods, which we are. We're the messengers of the gods. We travel in between the heavens and the earth.
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a weird situation. Some of the images have disappeared. I had images on this particular hard drive that doesn't seem to be there, which I was going to pull. But I'll put this on for now. So this is one that relates to these three principles, and so you can see these are three spheres, right? And each of the three spheres has within it three principles, three hermetic principles. And so we've got the ark, which is the spiritual body. Then we've got the ba, which is the emotional body or the astral body, essentially the imagination, and the memory, because emotions and memory are so connected, and the will, as the passion drives the will. And then the ka, which is driven, the extension of the will, that holds within it the vital life essences, the instincts and sensation elements. So you've got the ka, the ba, and the ark. And these are the 7 hermetic principles. Obviously, inspiration is principle of mentalism, which is also expansion. And intuition is the principle of intellect, higher intellect, as in like the lecture that you're taking in, which is the tuition that you're getting from inside. And the memory, the light that is produced by the presence of experience, being vibration. So we've got the intuition, and the second principle of Hermes being the principle of correspondence. All things correspond to other things. Memory, the principle of vibration. All things are vibrating, and so they produce a cadence. That's the memory. Then the principle of polarization, which is the imagination. This is why the image is formed, right? This has got to do with polarized boundaries that maintain a place for an image, the imagination. And the will, which is so the imagination relates to the principle of polarity, the fourth principle. The will relates to Saturn and his direct function, goal-oriented perspective, which is that which regulates the memory, which is the rhythm principle. For rhythm is the regulatory aspect of vibration, which is what stems the matter and everything that comes from the field of consciousness. So that's the principle of rhythm. And then the principle of cause and effect is an instinctual thing, because the cause produces the effect, produces the cause, produces the effect. We are reacting to the effects of causes within us. Our instinctual movement, our Mars element of our energy, makes us act. And that cause and effect is what produces action. And action produces cause and effect. And then the sphere of sensation, which is the merging of the polarities produced by the polarity of the imagination, the masculine and feminine, the taking in and coming together. So we've got these 7 principles, but then we've got the principle of will, which sits on the boundary between the ka and the ba, which is Saturn's sphere of rhythm. And then we've also got the sphere of vibration that sits on the mirror, on the cusp between the causal body, or the ark, and the astral body, or the ba, the emotional body. And so the memory has 2 elements, because the memory has the memory of the causal body, but it also has the memory of the astral body. So memory then has a bipolar nature in sense. And the will also has a bipolar nature in a sense, because the will is the extension of the etheric realm, the etheric body, with our logical logos based will, but it's also the emotional passion, the driving force of our emotional body. So we see how this then has two elements, and memory has two elements, which actually merges the 7 elements with the Enneagram, the Enad. And I wanted to share an image of the Enneagram here, which I don't have, but it's a good old fashioned that I've always got an Enneagram handy. And so here we see these two, right? The bar and the car and the arc, these 3 different principles, which is quite interesting if we look at it. Yeah, we can see the arc relating to the number 4 and to the number 6, which is the number of mystery. 6 is the number of mystery, and number 4 is a number of like knowledge, of experience that is made solid. And 5, the number of Mercury, sits in the balance between all things. And then we've got the 1, the 2, and the 3. And then we've got the 7, the 8, and the 9. And the 7, the 8, and the 9 is rooted within the rhythm principle, right? And the 1, the 2, and the 3 is rooted within the sensational principle. So you can see this really beautiful diagram here, which is basically describing the Ida and the Pingala from Vedic cosmology, that you see the snake serpent, but it's also describing the bar, the car, and the arc. And the arc is that unified field from whence these 2 polarities arise. So there are actually not really 3 separate things. Yeah. It's just that we come across the experience of these 3 separate things. I'm so shocked that these images vanished. I've never seen that happen before. Isn't that quite a head trip, huh?
Yeah, that was really interesting what you were saying about the car being like the fire, I guess, because you have the car and the bar. The bar is like the water, and you need the fire from the car to sort of move the water, and then again you have the car or the light being in the water, so you need both for movement. I've got a little graph here I drew. I hope it's going to be the right way around. I think it's back to front. Yeah, I think it's back to front. So yeah, that's one of the frameworks I use. It's really annoying. It's the wrong way around. Anyway, I'll try and explain it anyway. So I used the 3, 6, and 9 from the Enneagram, like the center triangle, and I worked out that the number 3 is C, which is the 3rd letter, which is to see patterns, which is the pitter patter, which is the light that comes down, or the car. And then the 6 on the other side is is an F, which stands for frequency, which is the bar, which is the matter matter. So you have the pitter patter, the pattern, the logos, the father, the fire, the spirit. And this side you have the water, the matter matter, the frequency, which is the soul. And then together it makes the Mercury, which is the messenger of the gods, which travels in between the heavens and the earth. And the number 9 on the Enneagram, the eye at the top of the pyramid, in German, 9 means no. So yeah, that is to know, to have your third eye open, to be balanced of both the masculine polarity and the feminine polarity.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You know, that whole notion of third eye. I've seen a lot of people talking about that. I've seen a lot of skeptics suggesting they don't believe in it. And I had this dynamic in a lucid dreaming group a little while ago when I explained to them actually what it is, and people were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense." Because the New Age has tried to misappropriate a lot of things, and I think it's a lot of it by design. I think once again, you know, it could seem far-fetched to think that like there's a big and powerful extraterrestrial presence behind a lot of what's happening on Earth, but I think as well, you know, once you start to see it, you can't unsee it. Yeah. And once we start to realize that there are these other beings that are riding on our consciousness field, there's no way to just step out of it. But it does, you know, it does equate to this idea of us being here as these backward, dumb, right? This is the idea. We've just barely gotten out of the caves. This is the idea they want us to believe. Yeah, that we're uneducated, we're not aware, we're not intelligent. And a little while ago, we were like basically just trying to run around and create wars, and we didn't have any technology, and we don't come from sophistication and great. But when we start looking at the archaeological records, we start seeing, hold on, there's records of human beings being organized socially that go 900,000 years back in time. And yes, we were making fires. They wanted us to believe that fires were only 50,000 years old. Right? And then they wanted us to believe that fires were only 150,000 years old. Well, now they've got evidence in one of their digs in, I think it is some part either in or next to modern day Israel, where they found this ancient settlement. And when they dated it, it's close to 1 million years old. And there's definite evidence that we were making fires there. The groups of people were gathering. So, you know, I do think that this is a big part of the conspiracy, is the idea of human beings not being able to take account. Like, did we build the pyramids or did some extraterrestrial build it? I think we're more than capable of building them ourselves and more, right? And I do believe that, you know, a big part of the agenda is to cause humans to think that we're less than what we are. And that we're subject to these other beings, instead of realizing that's not how it is. So like you go to a place, right? And people want you to think that you're a weed or whatever, right? And then you realize, hold on, like I'm the strongest one here. That's humans. I think we were beings of incredible strength and power. Humanity. I don't know. What do you think, Indy?
I think they apparently they show evidence of fire being used like 400,000 years ago, and they think it could have gone as far back as 2 million years ago, which is a lot different than the recent story of 40,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago. So they're always changing their story. You know, I'm always curious, how did Prometheus like steal the fire, and how did we receive it? The Native Americans have their own similar stories of how the fire was stolen from the gods and given to us, usually by like an animal god. But it's very fascinating to me. Some tribes actually apparently don't have fire in the wheel yet, like the North Sentinelese. So that's interesting as well. They've been uncontacted for 10,000 years.
The fire is symbolic of consciousness, though, right?
Yeah, fire is associated with male aspect, consciousness.
Yeah. So much like Apsu is consciousness, like fresh water, and Tiamat is the salt water, like ionized gas, plasma. And we are the children in between, like the messengers of the gods. We are Mercury. And I think that taking fire from the gods is, maybe it could be taking or it could be receiving. So Prometheus was deceived. Well, Prometheus was killed or whatever because he was open to receiving fire from the gods. I think that's a cool way to look at it. Like, not taking, or it's like be like are you everything I hear, I relate it to like the present moment. So why that myth like rings out to me is because I think right now we should be open to receiving the fire from the gods, the consciousness from the gods, of which there are many guardians of dimensions that you can tune into. And I think that like Prometheus had his liver pecked out, and Chiron, the wounded healer, gave his life to save Prometheus. And I think Enki was a similar character. Like Enki implanted the pineal gland, or Bush Whisperer, you guys might know this better than me, but Enki did something to plant something inside us to help us ascend, and he was demonized for it. Lucifer, the bringer of light, he or she, the bringer of light, was demonized. And I think that there are subtle ways that they try to suppress our spirit, which would be the fire or consciousness. And they do this by telling us that myths aren't true. They say, oh, that's just a myth. But myths are more real than anything. They're archetypal energies, like, that we can connect into, that when we hear them, we can remember our potential. They're sort of frameworks of understanding who we are and the world around us. So that's one way they squash our spirit, detach us from gods. Yeah. And I'll just add to that briefly, that another one which really annoys me is that people mistaking Lucifer for Satan. And I see it all the time, especially with Christians, saying, oh, Lucifer is Satan. The bringer of light is the bringer of light, which is associated with Venus, the morning star and the evening star. And Bush Whisperer, you've said that Venus is associated with the Akashic records, like the light.
Yeah,
exactly. And self-love as well.
Well, it's the gateway to the mysteries, and the mysteries are the mysteries of time. It's the greatest mystery. Space is an emanation of time. We like to think of space and time as separate, right? This is like a typical part of the brainwashing that we've been indoctrinated with. But when we consider space and time as being the same continuum, with time being a hyperdimension of space, then suddenly we start to get an idea of the nature of expansion and compression. And so this ability to transcend the physical realm is Venus. And that leads you into the Akashic. It's your destination. Jumping on a train, that train goes there. You know? Venus is the train, and that's where the train takes you. I've got some cool information here to share as well. I thought it might be quite a nice one. So here we see in 2018, I'm trying to find the name of the place in Israel, but they basically found Homo sapiens, right? That's us. Not such a different breed to us. We're outside West Africa, 177 to 194,000 years ago. Right? And a more recent finding suggests a population bottleneck for human ancestors around 900,000 years ago. That's also in Israel. Now, that dig, I was actually watching an archaeologist talking about that dig. And they're saying that, well, the popular idea that they're coming up with is that it wasn't a city or a structure, but they can see that there were gatherings of tribes 900,000 years ago at a particular place, because there's remnants there of pottery, there's remnants of things that have been, some things have been preserved, right? They can see that there was fossilized fire made there. There's been a lot of things are fossilized, so they're stored. And it's very clear when they go down into the earth that they start noticing this ancient peoples were there. But this one archaeologist mentions an interesting point. He was like, well, we don't know that they weren't building there, that they didn't have buildings, right? We just know that none of the buildings survived. And because it is assumed that they couldn't build, it's assumed that they were hunter-gatherers moving through this area. But there's a lot of stuff that's been found there. So they had to adapt their theory to being that the people have come and gone every year as per the climate change, which could be one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it could have been there was a city or an establishment there, but there's nothing left of that establishment to date. What if they were building with wood? And that part of northern Israel at that time was abundant, right? So if there's an abundance of wood around, wouldn't you build your house out of wood? Isn't that what they do in America? Right? They had all this abundance of wood, trees. So they don't build with rocks and stones. They build with wood because it's available. So it's very interesting. Just looking at a lot of these time notions. And the fact that, the fact that they are pulling things out into 900,000 year points. And they're looking at the genetic records now, which I find quite interesting. What are your thoughts about that? Well,
I'll just say quickly before I go is that story will probably come out that the land was promised to them 900,000 years ago when they do the genetic records or whatever. Wouldn't surprise me. But I've got to shoot off now. But I wanna listen to the rest of the conversation, so I'll check it out tomorrow because I'm interested to hear what else is uncovered by this discovery or whatever. It's just I smell bullshit. maybe it's real. Maybe it's real. Who knows? Who knows what's real? Is it real? But yeah, I'm going to shoot off. I'll just say before I leave that time and space, I just want to move back quickly, that time is measured by the amount of light emitted. Emit is an anagram of time, and space is measured by the pace of light. The S is the energy, and then the pace. I always try to remember that because they're both one and the same. It's just perception of it. That's all. Time and space is just perception. So yeah, nice chatting to you guys, and yeah, talk soon.
Great.
Big love.
Franklin.
Big blessings. Take care.
Bye.
Have a good day, and big love to you, your partner, and your little ones.
Yeah. Apparently the 900,000 years ago ancestry of the bottlenecking situation is from genetic data. There's no paleontological data to back that up.
What?
There's no like bones or anything to back up the 900,000 years ago human ancestry. It's all from genetic data. It's an inference from genetic data that they think there was a bottlenecking that occurred that would have occurred around that time based on our genes.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is interesting. I think what they do have is they've got evidence of habitation. They've got evidence of fires. This is the latest dig that they've got. They're still busy digging it now in the north. Is it the north of Israel? Somewhere out there. There's a few of them.
The Ubeida. Yeah.
I'll go and try and find the archaeologists and take a look at it specifically. But regardless, like, you know, the dates and stuff, the point is that they wanted us to believe that humans were stupid, right? And that we didn't have access to fire. But the more we look at it, the more we realize that we've been civilized for a lot longer than what they give us credit for. Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently,
Hundreds of thousands of years more.
in the Jordan Rift Valley, that site, they're saying that there was this vertebra from a 6 to 12-year-old child that was found at the site that was 1.5 million years old, apparently.
Well, they've got sort of, they're trying to build an image of the place, but it's just really interesting, you know, like the Homo sapien goes back. They've got clear evidence of hundreds of thousands of years, apparently. And like, I'm very skeptical when it comes to this, but I've noticed, and my cherry, I'm going to respond to that directly. It's very easy to just say that it's all nonsense, it's all bullshit, that everything in archaeologists is just total nonsense, and we can extract the narrative from Plato. That's not really how the real world works, though, right? Plato was 100% part of a mind control machine. The ancient Greeks, all of the writings they left us, this Josephus and all of these guys, they were all really the royalty that were writing for the rabble to follow. So it was part of a propaganda campaign. So a lot of these Greek ideas and these Greek stories that they've written for us are there to entrain our brains, a big part of it. I think, though, when it comes to actual, like, looking at what's going on at the bones of the world, I think there's a lot more there. And I do believe that there are interests that have got like their own agendas. I do think that there are people that are going to lie. I think there are going to be misinterpretations of the evidence. But I do think that there are a lot of archaeologists out there that are just archaeologists. And I want to repeat that, my cherry. There are archaeologists out there that are just archaeologists. They aren't working for the Illuminati. They have nothing to do with the Illuminati. They're just people that are interested in archaeology, and they go and they dig up artifacts. It's what they do. Sure, their brainwashing is going to affect how they interpret the information, but I think that, you know, the information is very relevant. And I'll give you an example as well. This idea that you'll see propagated that says that ancient Egypt is just a big lie, right? This is a very popular idea that has been propagated. And you mentioned, my cherry, you mentioned something that was said by, who was it, Slick. And I noticed that, you know, there is lie. There are lies when it comes to the information and the evidence of ancient Egypt. And I think that the dynasties that are given to us have been concocted. But I don't think that's the same as saying that everything in ancient Egypt was brought by ship from America and deposited in ancient Egypt, and the entire story is a lie. Now, I think that's going too far. I think that's getting into the realms of like far-fetched fantasy. I think when we get down to the real world, we go like, yeah, well, they have invented the timelines of ancient Egypt. They have doctored the way we interpret the evidence. But I think there's a lot of legitimate evidence in Egypt to say that it was part of an ancient culture. And I think when we speak about ancient Egypt, we speak about the land of Kem. I don't think we're talking about one local little place. I think the ancient land of Kem is going to be a much bigger chunk on the map. It was an empire. And I think it was in those days the equivalent of Rome, the known world. So you're going to find that there were lots of places that this empire of Kem would have touched. Probably the Americas is a part of it. Probably there's a part of it everywhere you look. The problem then becomes that people want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and they want to say that it's all nonsense, that anything that's related to archaeology is just nonsense, which is something that people have been doing. And I think that not only has our history been manipulated in the 1800s, but I believe our history is being manipulated right now, right here. And do you want to know who is doing the manipulating? It's coming from within our own ranks. It's coming from within the own truther community, the researchers that discover one piece of information that says that they lied about certain things in Egypt. Now we must write off everything about Egypt and start with a brand new story out of the box, which is just, frankly, ridiculous a notion to follow through with if you think about it, right? Because there is a certain amount of legitimacy to ancient things that have happened in these parts of the world. However, I do agree that the dynasties, the numbers, they've totally been invented. What are your thoughts, Indy? You're somebody who spent a lot of time researching anthropology.
Yeah, I feel like the dynasty numbers to me seem outrageous to me.
Yeah.
But honestly, you know, those could be the numbers of the figures that we're familiar of. I feel like the structures that are there are obviously from a much older time, and it's baffling to us all, I think, because that history of that time has pretty much been lost or covered up. So it's hard for us to comprehend what's going on. It's easier for them to put in, you know, like these theories that seem to have some kind of backing. The idea that Khufu had a cartouche there stood up for a long time. They did more research on that. It seems like it was made by ink, like the graffiti that was there. It was made much later. It doesn't really stand up. So, but people had already suspected that before. But I think we kind of, people have brought more attention to this, particularly with like stuff out in the Mesoamerican region where the Incan and the pre-Incan building, where it's pretty obviously different. And I think you could kind of bring light to this. I think they really want to go out there and say that there was like giants that did this, or much more advanced extraplanetary race or something possibly that had done this. But if you look at the advance of human communication technology and the lack of productivity that results from it, it could shine some light on this. Like, just as cell phones have become available for people over the past like few decades, you see like a huge downfall in like musical production of like real like great music, and things that take time, you know, things that take time and patience are being lost. So, you know, if that we had this, like people had so much time on their hands during older times, and there wasn't that many people around, and they built these most amazing structures with just like a small population. As populations got bigger, things get more chaotic, and the building got like much more haphazard and less advanced. They spent less time working on the blocks themselves and putting the blocks in. They continued, I think, to use free stacking stone without using mortar, though. So it does show that they maintained some of the abilities that have been lost to today. And so some of the people in Egypt have really given answers that beyond what the archaeologists were able to find, just from tales that have been passed down through the heritage, that in order to cut the blocks, that they used a blade and they just poured sand in, and the blades actually just pushed on the sand, which did the cutting between the blocks, and they just kept pushing the blocks against each other and cutting on them with the sand until they met each other. And I feel like if we consider the idea of people having the most amount of patience that is unfathomable to us today, the things that they could achieve by spending years of their life just chipping away at like one block or something, you know, and being proud of their work. When it had been not surpassed at their time, they were like on the pinnacle of achievement. But now that we can like build an entire structure in like a week or something, the advanced technology, it doesn't seem that reasonable to spend like more than a week chipping on one block. However, I feel like when people can do these things like by hand, it becomes much more of a sacred structure than things that we can build like by some machine. And also, if it takes longer, it's more well thought through. You have more time to prepare and do this right. Not going to build it on a swampland or some quicksand or something. Whereas that's kind of one of the difficulties with having high technology is you might take those things for granted and just do things kind of haphazardly or impetuously without thinking them through first as much.
Yeah, brother. You know, I want to bring out something here, point out something which is an anomaly.
Mhm.
And Josh, listen to me. When you come through here again, do me a favor. Be as quiet as a mouse. Thank you. So, this is why people, like, you'll find that there's this popular movement. My Cherry, you mentioned Gabriel's story of about archaeology. What was it about the digging of the where was it? Okay. I'm not sure. Anyway, there was something that you said there that here I'm going to point out something that I can see, which is a clear anomaly. Yes, even like they'll acknowledge openly that there's lots of different pyramids in Egypt, right?
Mhm.
So there's the Great Pyramid, which is constructed with massive stone quarried blocks. Then there are other pyramids. When I did history of art in high school and we studied Egypt and the pyramids, I gawked, and I actually gave up I actually gave up art because the history of art was too ridiculous. I said, there's no way that the way you're telling me they built those pyramids. But there are different pyramids. Most of the pyramids are done with small clay-baked rocks. They are trying to tell us those are older. They are not older. Those are modern pyramids that were built in the last few centuries. It's obvious. Then you've got other pyramids which were built older. You can see by this construction of the pyramids, the way they're built, that they're different. Then you've got the Great Pyramid and the other two old pyramids. Those pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid, is built with huge, massive stone blocks that are quarried from far away. That is blatantly an ancient pyramid. And if you look inside that pyramid, it's a smaller pyramid that's built out of granite. And that granite comes from even further away. And then the sandstone was built on top of the granite. So you can imagine, Josh, you're not allowed to do, no, unlock that. Unlock that. Straight to bed. Straight to bed. It's too late, my boy. It's too late. No more excuses to run around, hey? Straight into bed. So it's like, what is the time? It's 10 to 10. His mother. He wraps her around his finger. But so they're blatantly lying to us here about a lot of this nonsense, right? And so what happens is some people see these lies and they say, well, it must all be lies. There are no pyramids there. All the pyramids were built in the last 300 years. And this popular TikTok nonsense that's going around the web. They're all these TikTokers and YouTubers, and they're saying that the whole ancient Egypt thing is a hoax. There was never Egypt there. It was all just invented in the last 300 years. Yes, in the last 300 years, a lot of pyramids were built. Yes, you can see it's evidential. If you know how to interpret the information, it's obvious. However, there are older structures, and the older structures are under the ground. And now we've just started to look at those older structures under the ground. And that's where we're going to find the real ancient Egypt, right?
Yeah.
The real ancient Egypt is under the ground. Then they've got one remnant pyramid, which was built relatively old. They could be right about that pyramid being 3 or 4 or 5,000, 6,000 years old. But when you go down under the ground, there are going to be pyramids that are going 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years old. That's my guess. That's my idea. That's my projection of thought. So I think like when we look at this, you'll find that there's a tendency for new ages and truth speakers to want to throw the baby out of the bathwater and say, well, if you lied about A and you lied about B, then A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, right to Z, it's all lies. When actually it's not the case, right? They're not all lies. It's just 5 or 6 really well-told lies that completely change what you're looking at, but it doesn't mean that everything's a lie. This is something that I think is dangerous, because now you got all these people giving you a whole new version of reality, a whole new version of history. Instead of trying to decipher the lies, they just say it's all nonsense.
Yeah, the place where the Great Pyramid is built, and that whole civilization that was around it, very well may have had a very turbulent climatic situation going on since the Younger Dryas. After the drying of the icebergs and the running off of a lot of the water and stuff, there's a lot of flooding in certain regions. And so places that are like on the delta of a river may have, like when the sea levels were much lower, may have been established long ago and have great ruins there that were covered up by silt over thousands of years up until the modern era, and they might have built over those ruins many a time. And we see with the Mesoamerican ruins that they built the temple long ago, and then they built another temple over the temple several times. So I think that's a common occurrence, but the different situation is that with the Nile Delta, there could be things underground from older civilizations when the sea levels were lower that could have quickly been filled in by sand from like sandstorms and flooding silt from the Nile Delta River as well. So there could be things that are much deeper there than they would be in other places. But also there could be civilization from long ago, like millions of years ago, which was mostly wiped out from time, just being crushed by stone and tectonic movements and floods and things. But there could be things like little small remnants of those old ancient civilizations from before our known history that could come up, and they call those OOP arts, out of place artifacts. And there's a lot of those. There's a lot of those that show up that seem to be from like human technology from like millions of years ago that are pretty fascinating. And a lot of people have gone into doing research now on whether there could have been human civilization or high technology civilizations of some sort by whatever species it was in the past, in the very ancient past. And they found that, yeah, millions of years ago, there does seem to have been a civilization that was creating the type of like waste products and materials and like gases and things that we produce today were also being produced millions of years ago anomalously that would not be produced by nature. So some interesting studies on that.
Yeah, brother, I think like you're right on the money. And now that they've got more of the scans of what's underneath ancient Egypt, it confirms what the old geographers and the historians from Greece, when they went to Egypt, they claimed that there were these most amazing structures under the ground, that there were catacombs. In other words, a city underground that we see as catacombs, right? And where you could walk around in this underground city, which is like a maze, and it's huge. It's massive. And now we've been getting different scans. Some of the scans have been, in the last 15 years, there have been a number of scans done, and they've been really careful to keep it out of the public domain. And so they only take the scans and talk about them in the media, the ones that aren't so easy to prove. But there are a lot of different scans using different kinds of Earth penetrating radar, using different kinds, using satellite, using localized. There's an extensive body of technology that's being used. There's an extensive lot of scans. And so it seems like, we're getting to the point where we're going to start looking under the sands. And my gut says to me, what we're going to find down there is going to be profound. But at the same time, I want to point out that what we call ancient Egypt, and I'm not talking about that nonsense that they speak about with their timelines, which doesn't seem to add up. I'm talking about the real land of Kem. I believe it was a global culture. I believe it was all around. I'm not saying Ronan's wrong that the land of Kem wasn't in America. I believe it was. But I think it was also in the Middle East. I think it was also in Europe. I think what we're seeing in Greece is part of the ancient part of Greece is part of the ancient superculture of this, which then became the Phoenicians, right? I think the ancient Egypt predates the Phoenicians. I think the time of writing with pictures, they'll tell us that all of the hieroglyphic languages is nonsense. I believe that our interpretation of it might not be correct. I believe that our modern linguists may not have understood these pictures as well as what they think they do. But these ancient forms of writing in pictograms, this is very ancient. And it's found all over the world. We find them here in Africa, in the southern Africa. We find them in China. We find them in India. We find them everywhere. So, writing in pictures is a very, very ancient part of our heritage. And it's probably going to be to the scales of 10s, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years, maybe more, maybe hundreds of thousands of years ancient, that we're going to start recognizing the true cultural legacy of the land of Kem. And I think like they have sold us a crock of nonsense when it comes to the story of Egypt, but they had to use some truths to tell their lies, because there are people that are living there and there are actual structures that are underneath, and there are pieces of evidence that people do come across. So I think this is like brings us full circle. The best told lie is one that relies heavily upon the truth. Wow, we're reaching 4 hours. What else do you want to throw on the table, dear brother Indy?
Also, I feel like you have to look at the origins of Al-Kimu or Al-Kem, coming from the etymology of being the colony, Al-Ki, of Mu, Al-Kimu. And that name being obfuscated as Al-Kem being reduced down to from Ki being colony and Mu being what's now currently referred to as Lemuria, an ancient civilization before Atlantis. They've obfuscated the name to mean black or dark soil or fertile soil. So, that's also something you have to consider, that like even just a few centuries ago, like around the 16th century and the 1500s, there's maps of routes and roads in cities along the Sahara Desert where people would go and live and visit and travel through, that are no longer there. And so it not long ago, there was a forest there, and there were giant seas or lakes in the Sahara Desert. And there was a very lush vegetation around where the pyramids are during their times. So things were very different. And that you have to consider that there's so much lost from the change of the times and the movement of the river through there. But there's so much more lost to the history of the origins, where it was said that the grail holders of the Atlanteans were said to have been the people that became the first pharaohs, and they live today as the Berbers, and they have roots to the people that became the Basque and Armenian people, that have traditions with maritime navigation and stuff from very old times. So it's all really connected to a maritime race of a breakaway civilization.
Phoenicians,
Yeah.
who we call the Phoenicians. Another story that I think has been obfuscated for us. And I believe that the Phoenicians are the ancient Egyptians, just maybe through a different chapter of time, maybe what they became, or maybe it's another name, you know. Maybe that's the tail end. Maybe Phoenicia is what we're looking at. Maybe when we're looking at ancient Egypt, what they are telling us in our books are ancient Egypt. That might be the legacy of Phoenicia, right? Because they were like really they were a global culture, Phoenicia, with their ships and their maritime practices and laws, which they've brought to us, which we to this day are still keeping. This is Phoenician law, isn't it? This maritime law. They're the ones who instituted it.
Mesoamerican languages of the Aztlan people are connected to the Basque language and the Berber language. They have very strange Q and X and Z letters that aren't found in other languages. They're found to be very similar. They think that's where the name Atlantic comes from, the Aztlan Mesoamerican ancient language of the Mayans. That was like kind of a bridge between like the Basque people. And so it's thought that maybe Atlantis was like ancient Americas. Maybe the sea level rose dramatically. Maybe there was an island that was wiped out. Maybe the tectonic plate dropped, because we have this really strange city I found off the coast of Puerto Rico that's like 1,000 feet below the sea level with crystal pyramids. It's quite low for it to be that low. But there's so much more to be discovered with all this new discoveries.
Well, brother, everybody in the chat, it's been an honor. Shinobi, yourself, and of course Zerilat and Vincent, my cherry. Lucky P, namaste, Lucky P. I hope you're good. I hope you're thriving. I hope you're well. Sean Carter, namaste. And of course, Vincent Turjerka and Rob, and all of you people in the chat. You guys have been really amazing. It's been really great having you guys here. You bring some really lovely information to us and inspire us. Sending you all so much love, warmth, and blessings. Out tuition and egalite. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but big love and blessings to all of you. Take it easy. Keep it sweet. Don't forget, life is short. It's a dream. Live the dream and dream your life to what you want your life to be. Sending you all big love and big blessings. And take it easy. Om Shanti.